Good morning, Foxes class, and welcome to your English lesson today. Today we are going to finish innovating our story. So we are going to write the ending today. The stories I've been sent so far have been amazing. So hopefully you can do just as wonderful a job today on your ending. In your book, can you please write the date, the LO, and then have a go at editing your resolution for me. So the things I would like you to pay particular attention to today are, did you remember inverted commas around your speech? Have you got said in there, or have you remembered that we threw said out of the window and we have got much better synonyms instead? And have you got interesting adjectives? So no big, no small. See if you can find some synonyms for those as well for me. So in your book, can you do the date, the LO, and have a go at editing your resolution? Pause the video here for me. Okay, super job. Now we are going to go on to our story map. So the video is on our class page still. Have a go at practicing it aloud. Hopefully you know most of the story off by heart, because that will really help you when we move on to our hot task tomorrow. Pause the video here for me and have a go at your story map. Okay, so today we are going to innovate our ending. Now, what do I always do before I write the next paragraph? That's right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread my last paragraph just to remind myself what had happened in my story so far. As you can see here, last lesson we wrote the second part of our resolution. So let's read it together. Here you are, announced Mrs. Davis, passing Mrs. House her head teacher mug. Her hands couldn't help but shake as she passed the mug across the desk. Would Mrs. House realize what she had done? Thank you, Mrs. House replied. With a bead of sweat dripping down her forehead, Mrs. Davis watched as Mrs. House lifted the mug to her lips. To her surprise, Mrs. House's hair began to change colour. The blonde started turning a vibrant blue. Mrs. Davis stood watching, her mouth open and her heart racing. Oh, I needed that. It was delicious, smiled Mrs. House sweetly. So in this paragraph here, we had Mrs. House drinking the tea and something happened to her. In my story, her hair changed colour. Okay, I'm just going to remind myself on my plan of what it was that I needed to include within my ending. So we can see here that we have the twist ending of her hair turning blue. Put in some speech. I want to include a two-pair sentence. So my next paragraph is going to include that two-pair sentence. Let's go back now then to my ending and see how I can add that two-pair sentence in. Now, if we read our paragraph from the model text, it says, "From then on, Grandma was a changed person. She was always sweet and helped around the house." A few weeks later, George found Grandma's real medicine, much to his surprise. Understandably, he still gives her his marvellous concoction. Okay, so I'm going to start innovating my paragraph now. I've got to remember every paragraph needs to start with an indent, doesn't it? Now, I quite like this "from then on," so I'm going to magnify that for my story. From then on, comma, that's not going to be Grandma was a changed person. I think I'm going to say about Mrs. House being blue, perhaps forever. So from then on, Mrs. House always had her blue hair. So from then on, Mrs. House always had her blue hair. She was always sweet and helped around the house. Well, Mrs. House was sweet anyway, wasn't she? But perhaps she realised that she really liked her blue hair, so she decided to keep it. I think my next sentence might be, she didn't mind though, as blue was her favourite colour. Okay, can you spot two mistakes in that sentence? Have a look and see if you can find them. Well done if you notice that didn't needs an apostrophe in it. Why does didn't need an apostrophe? Ah, that's right, it's a contraction of did not. That's one of my mistakes. Can you spot the other one? Ah, I spelt favourite wrong, haven't I? I wonder if you can spell favourite correctly. There we go. Okay, let's reread to check it makes sense so far. From then on, Mrs. House always had her blue hair. She didn't mind though, as blue was her favourite colour. Now I like this idea of a few weeks later George finding the medicine. But of course, Mrs. Davis can't find the tea bags because they used them up, didn't they, for their experiment. I'm wondering if perhaps she might be in a supermarket and find the tea bags on a shelf. Maybe she might buy some new ones for Mrs. Davis. So I'm going to Magpie a few weeks later. What do I need after a few weeks later? Well done if you noticed I need a comma. A few weeks later, Mrs. Davis was doing her weekly shop. Where might she be doing her weekly shop? Maybe in Asda? That's where I do my weekly shop. Mrs. Davis was doing her weekly shop in Asda when she spotted Mrs. House's favourite tea bags on the shelf. Okay, so Mrs. Davis was doing her weekly shop in Asda when she spotted Mrs. House's favourite tea bags on the shelf. I think this is where I'm going to put my two-pair sentence in. So can you think of any adjectives to describe how Mrs. House might feel when she sees those tea bags on the shelf? Now, the adjectives I've decided to use are embarrassed. I think she'll be very embarrassed remembering what happened. Embarrassed and surprised. She might be very surprised to find those tea bags on the shelf. What do I need after my first pair? Ah, my comma, don't I? Embarrassed and surprised. Guilty. I think she might feel very guilty about the fact that her head teacher now has blue hair. Guilty and horrified. She might be horrified at her memory, perhaps. What do I need after my second pair? Ah, yes, a comma again, don't I? Embarrassed and surprised, guilty and horrified. What do you think she might do when she sees these tea bags on the shelf? I think that she might maybe buy some for the head teacher to say sorry. Embarrassed and surprised, guilty and horrified, Mrs. Davis bought all of the boxes she could carry as an apology to Mrs. House. Okay, let's reread our paragraph. From then on, Mrs. House always had her blue hair. She didn't mind though, as blue was her favourite colour. A few weeks later, Mrs. Davis was doing her weekly shop in Asda when she spotted Mrs. House's favourite tea bags on the shelf. Embarrassed and surprised, guilty and horrified, Mrs. Davis bought all of the boxes she could carry as an apology to Mrs. House. Okay, I want one last sentence, which is going to begin with my ly opener. Now, I really like the ly opener, understandably, actually, so I'm going to magnify that one for my story. Understandably, and then I need my comma, don't I? Understandably, comma, Mrs. Davis has never drunk a cup of tea herself since. I'm going to put an exclamation mark at the end of mine. Okay, let's read our paragraph one more time and check that it makes sense. Remember, this is our ending, so we've got to make sure we get to the end of our story. From then on, Mrs. House always had her blue hair. She didn't mind though, as blue was her favourite colour. A few weeks later, Mrs. Davis was doing her weekly shop in Asda when she spotted Mrs. House's favourite tea bags on the shelf. Embarrassed and surprised, guilty and horrified, Mrs. Davis bought all of the boxes she could carry as an apology to Mrs. House. Understandably, Mrs. Davis has never drunk a cup of tea herself since. Now, one thing I've noticed as I've been reading this is that actually I've got the word favourite twice in here. So I'm wondering if perhaps I can change this one. In Asda, when she spotted Mrs. House's favourite tea bags. Perhaps instead of saying favourite tea bags, I could say she spotted Mrs. House's tea bags of choice, because that shows that they're her favourite as well. But I haven't repeated myself. Okay. From then on, Mrs. House always had her blue hair. She didn't mind though, as blue was her favourite colour. A few weeks later, Mrs. Davis was doing her weekly shop in Asda when she spotted Mrs. House's tea bags of choice on the shelf. Embarrassed and surprised, guilty and horrified, Mrs. Davis bought all of the boxes she could carry as an apology to Mrs. House. Understandably, Mrs. Davis has never drunk a cup of tea herself since. I think that sounds much better now. I haven't got a favourite twice in there. Okay, now it's your turn. So I would like you to have a go at writing your ending for me. Can you make sure you've got some fronted adverbials in there, remembering your comma after them, and also that you have got your to-pair sentence as well. So all of those adjectives to describe how they are feeling. Now remember, this is your ending, so it has to get to the end of your story, okay? Well, we've reached our conclusion. Please do send me in your paragraphs when you've written them, because I would love to read them.